What's going on, guys? Welcome back to our next GCSE Psychology video on our psychology journey. We are looking at non-verbal communication today, so let's get on it. So starting off with looking at communication and non-verbal behavior. So verbal versus non-verbal communication. Let's try and get a better understanding of what they are with a definition. So verbal communication refers to the use of spoken or written language to convey messages. It includes the words we choose, our tone of voice, and the clarity and structure of our sentences. It's typically direct and often the primary method used in formal settings such as meetings or public speaking. Non-verbal communication involves conveying information without words. This includes facial expressions, gestures, posture, eye contact, body movement, and even silence. It often provides context to verbal communication and can reveal true feelings or intentions, even when words do not. What about the functions of eye contact? Well, eye contact itself is a powerful form of non-verbal communication, right? Its functions include regulating the flow of conversation, signaling attraction, and expressing emotion. So let's look at those in a little more detail. So regulating the flow of conversation. Making or breaking eye contact when we're talking can signal when it's someone's turn to speak or listen, and it helps to manage conversation smoothly. Let's look at Adam Kendon's 1967 study, known as the two-way mirror study. Kendon used a two-way mirror to observe people communicating and found that facial expressions and gestures increase when a listener is visible, even if they can't be heard, showing that non-verbal communication is audience dependent. Signaling attraction. Sustained or repeated eye contact can be a sign of romantic or social interest, often used unconsciously. Conway et al. 2007 found that faces making direct eye contact were rated as more attractive than faces with an averted gaze or looking away, suggesting eye contact acts as a positive social signal. We use it to express emotion. Reginald Adams and Robert Kleck investigated how facial expressions and eye gaze direction work together when people interpret emotions from pictures of faces. They found that approach-oriented emotions, things like happiness and anger, are recognized more easily when the face has direct eye gaze, when it's looking directly at the person observing. Whereas avoidance-orientated emotions, things like fear or sadness, are recognized more easily when the face has an averted gaze, so when the eyes aren't looking directly at the individual. The conclusion of this is that emotion perception isn't just about facial expression alone. Contextual cues like eye gaze play an important role in how we understand emotion. So quick evaluation. So positives is that it has real-world application. Body language research has real-world applications, such as improving communication in interviews and policing, which increase the usefulness of the research. It does, however, lack control. Body language studies often lack control over variables such as culture and context, which reduce the reliability of those findings. We also need to consider ethical issues. See, body language research may involve observing people without informed consent, and this can raise ethical issues and limits how the research can be conducted. Let's look in detail at body language. So what is body language? Well, body language refers to the physical behaviors used to communicate consciously or unconsciously. Key aspects include open and closed posture, postural echo, and touch. So what is open and closed posture? So open posture, things like our arms being relaxed, our body facing towards the person that we're speaking to, suggest openness, confidence, and friendliness. Closed posture, so if we've got our arms crossed, if we're turned away from the individual that we're speaking to, these may indicate defensiveness, discomfort, or disinterest. Hugh McGinley from 1975 investigated how posture affects perception by showing participants photographs of people in open and closed postures. He found that individuals with open posture were judged as more confident, relaxed, and approachable, showing posture influences social impression. Postural echo. This occurs when one person subtly mirrors another person's body language. It often reflects rapport and empathy between two people. This study looked at postural echo. Participants interacted with a confederate who either mirrored their posture, so copied what they were doing subtly, or did not while introducing a new product. And they found that when the confederate copied the participant's posture, participants liked the confederate more and had more positive attitudes towards the product, suggesting that postural echo can unconsciously increase persuasion and product appeal. Touch. Touch can communicate warmth, support, or dominance depending on context. For example, a handshake can be formal and professional, while a pat on the back may signal encouragement or approval. Personal space. So personal space is the physical distance we maintain between ourselves and others. It varies based on cultural differences, status differences, and also gender differences. Agnieszka Srkowska et al. 2017's Personal Space or Cross-Cultural Study found that personal space preferences vary across cultures, with people from colder and less densely populated countries preferring larger interpersonal distances than those from warmer, more crowded countries. Conclusion is that personal space is not universal. It is culturally learned and influenced by environmental and social factors. So Edward T. Hall, 1963, he proposed the idea of proxemics, how humans use personal space as a form of non-verbal communication. He came up with 4 distance zones. So the intimate distance, 0 to 45 centimeters, close relationships, things like family and partners, so that's a dark blue. Personal distance, 45 centimeters to 1.5 meters, is for friends and informal interactions. Social distance, 1.2 to 3.6 meters, is for strangers and for formal situations. And the public distance is above 3.6 meters, so public speaking, performances, etc. His key point is that these distances are culturally learned, so what feels normal space varies between cultures. So we've got numbers here, we've got these distances, but these will vary dependent on the cultural context and the background of the individual. Some of the strengths of this study is that personal space research helps us to know how to interact in everyday life. Weakness is that it only focuses on one factor, and that studies may involve unrepresentative samples. Darwin's evolutionary theory. So Charles Darwin argued that non-verbal communication, especially facial expressions, is innate and universal, and it isn't something that we learn. His key idea is that emotional expression, for example happiness, fear, anger, evolved because they had survival value. What is that evolutionary function? Expressions helped our ancestors communicate quickly, warn others, and coordinate social behaviors. For example, fear equals danger nearby. Universality. Because they are biologically inherited, according to Darwin, people across different cultures show similar facial expressions for basic emotions. Some of the strengths of this concept is that they're supported by research into facial expressions such as Elkman et al. 1972 study. And it's also supported by research into the behavior of newborn babies. Weaknesses is that it struggles to explain non-verbal communication in different cultures. Innate versus learned. So the innate explanations for behavior. So for example, John Bowlby's 1969 study argued that non-verbal behaviors such as smiling and eye contact are innate and play a key role in attachment formation. These behaviors are adaptive because they help infants maintain proximity to caregivers, increasing survival chances. Diana Rosenstein and Harriet Oster, 1988, studied congenitally blind infants and found they still showed basic facial expressions like happiness, sadness, and anger. Because these infants could not have learned expressions by observing others, this strongly suggests facial expressions are biologically inherent. James Thompson's 1941 study observed that young infants displayed similar facial expressions across different environments, and this supports the idea that early non-verbal behavior appears before learning can take place, indicating that it is innate or built in. Learned explanations. Well, we looked at Edward Hall's 1966 study previously, and this introduced the concept of proxemics, identifying different zones of personal space: intimate, personal, social, and public. And he found that preferred distances vary between cultures, again, showing that personal space is learned rather than innate. Roxy Black, 2011, she found that gestures, posture, and eye contact differ across cultures, suggesting non-verbal behavior is shaped by cultural norms and expectations, not biology alone. Social learning theory, or SLT, explains how non-verbal behavior is learned. Children observe role models, parents, peers, media, and imitate their non-verbal behaviors and are reinforced when the behavior is socially acceptable. Now let's take a look at Masaki Yuki's study of emoticons in 2007. This is one of our named studies, so it's important that we understand this study and that we are familiar with it. So here we can see Masaki Yuki. So what's the aim of this study? Well, the aim was to investigate cultural differences in how people interpret emotions from emoticons. Nowadays we have emojis, but emoticons. So method. Participants from Japan and the USA were shown emoticons where either the eyes or the mouth changed, for example, happy eyes with a neutral mouth or vice versa. They rated how happy or sad the faces looked, and we can see these examples on screen now. So what were the findings? Found that Japanese participants focused more on the eyes when judging the emotion, whereas the American participants focused more on the mouth. To conclude, people from different cultures attend to different facial features when interpreting emotions. This supports the idea that non-verbal communication is influenced by culture and it is not something that is universal. So, to evaluate, strengths. We had high control over the study because the emoticons were standardized, so all participants saw the same stimuli, increasing the level of reliability. This is a cross-cultural comparison, so using participants from different cultures, this increased the validity when studying cultural differences in non-verbal communication. Data is objective, so objective data. Participants gave ratings, producing quantitative data that is less likely to be subjective and easier to analyze. What about the weaknesses? There's a low level of ecological validity. Judging emoticons is artificial and may not reflect how emotions are interpreted in real-life interactions. The generalizability is quite low. So the study mainly compared Japanese and American participants, so findings may not apply to all cultures. Reductionism, so it's quite reductionist. Emoticons simplify facial expressions and ignore other cues like tone of voice or body language. Alright guys, hopefully that gives you a better understanding of some levels of non-verbal communication. Hopefully you guys are managing to keep up. You're pausing, you're making your notes, you're liking and you're subscribing if you haven't already. We're going to continue our journey in the next one, so I will see you guys there. Peace.